Johnny A. Johnson spent 18 years on death row, his life hanging in the balance. To understand how he ended up there, we must rewind to the troubled roots of a man shaped by chaos and struggle. Before we proceed, please take a moment to like and subscribe to be part of our growing community. Johnny Johnson was born in 1978 in Missouri, a place where life was tough from the start. His mother faced a troubled pregnancy, and Johnny came into the world with developmental challenges that marked him early on. Raised in a turbulent household, details of his family life are scarce, but it was far from stable. Violence and dysfunction scarred his childhood, leaving deep wounds. By age 5, he was already struggling in school, flunking both kindergarten and first grade, a sign of deeper issues that went beyond academics. At 14, doctors diagnosed him with schizophrenia, a condition that brought haunting voices and a fractured grip on reality. These weren't just childhood troubles, they were the cracks in a foundation that would crumble later. As a teenager, Johnson's mental health spiraled. He was admitted to psychiatric clinics multiple times, battling suicidal thoughts and hallucinations. By 18, he'd been hospitalized 4 times, once reporting blackouts and visions of deceased friends urging him to harm himself. School was a battleground. He faced constant challenges, unable to keep up or fit in. His early signs of trouble weren't just fights or petty theft, they were cries for help that went unanswered. The system failed him, offering little support for his worsening condition. Each hospitalization, each unheard plea, pushed him closer to a breaking point. Johnny Johnson's path to Casey Williamson's family began through a web of familiarity and trust in their small Valley Park community. Johnson's older sister was a childhood friend of Casey's mother, Angie Weidman, tying the families together through years of shared history. This connection made Johnson, then 24, a known figure to Casey's parents, Angie and Ernie Williamson. He wasn't a stranger, he was someone they saw around, a neighbor's brother, who seemed harmless enough. On July 25, 2002, the Williamsons hosted a barbecue at their grandfather's house on Benton Street, where Casey lived with her family. Johnson attended, blending in with the crowd. His presence didn't raise alarms, his sister's bond with Angie gave him a pass. After the barbecue, with the night growing late, Casey's parents allowed Johnson to sleep on their couch, a decision rooted in their trust and the close-knit nature of their community. To Casey, a 6-year-old full of innocence, Johnson was just another familiar face, someone she'd seen at family gatherings. Their relationship wasn't deep, Johnson wasn't a close friend or frequent visitor, but his connection through his sister made him welcome enough to stay there. How could a single night's kindness lead to such a devastating betrayal? The truth would unravel in hours. Cassandra Casey Lynn Williamson was a bright, 6-year-old girl whose smile could light up a room. Born on November 23, 1995, in Valley Park, Missouri, Casey lived with her mother, Angie Weidman, and her siblings at her grandfather's house on Benton Street, a close-knit community about 20 miles west of St. Louis. Casey was a joyful child, full of energy and curiosity. She loved singing at her church's Wednesday night worship, her voice ringing out with innocence just 36 hours before her life was stolen. On the morning of July 26, 2002, in Valley Park, Missouri, a horrific crime unfolded that would haunt a community. Johnny Johnson woke up on the couch in Casey's grandfather's house, where he had stayed after the previous night's barbecue. Around 7 a.m., Casey's father, Ernie Williamson, saw her in the kitchen before stepping into the bathroom. In that brief moment, Johnson made a chilling decision. Seeing Casey alone, watching TV in the living room, he decided to act on his dark impulses. He lured the 6-year-old out of the house, convincing her to walk with him. Court records reveal he carried her on his shoulders, a seemingly playful gesture, as they headed toward an abandoned glass factory less than a mile away, nestled in a wooded area with trails and a sunken pit. At the factory, surrounded by overgrown weeds and crumbling walls, Johnson's intentions turned sinister. In a pit more than 6 feet deep, he exposed himself and tore off Casey's underwear, attempting to sexually assault her. Casey, brave despite her small size, screamed, and fought back, trying to break free. Enraged and panicked, Johnson grabbed a brick and struck her head multiple times, causing severe injuries. When she continued to move, he lifted a basketball-sized boulder and brought it down on her head and neck, delivering a fatal blow that fractured the right side of her skull. Casey stopped breathing soon after. To cover his tracks, Johnson buried her body under rocks, leaves, and debris in the pit, then walked to the nearby Merrimack River to wash Casey's blood and other evidence from his body. The hunt for Casey Williamson's killer began the moment her father, Ernie, realized she was missing on July 26, 2002. Valley Park, Missouri, turned into a hive of activity as nearly 100 police officers, FBI agents, and volunteers scoured the woods near the Merrimack River. A critical clue came early. A neighbor reported seeing Johnny Johnson carrying Casey, still in her nightgown, on his shoulders that morning, heading toward the abandoned glass factory. This sighting shifted suspicion to Johnson, a familiar face who had slept on the family's couch the previous night. Hours later, police spotted him walking down a street near the home, his clothes soaking wet, a sign he'd been to the river. When questioned, Johnson initially denied any contact with Casey, claiming she died in an accident and he buried her. But investigators didn't buy it. A private citizen searching the factory found Casey's body in a pit, covered with rocks and debris, her injuries clearly no accident. Blood evidence and Johnson's wet clothes linked him to the crime scene. After hours of interrogation, his story cracked. Around 11:30 p.m., while discussing the Bible with a detective, Johnson confessed on audio tape, admitting he lured Casey to the factory to rape and kill her. Police arrested him immediately, charging him with first-degree murder, kidnapping, attempted rape, and armed criminal action. At trial in 2005, the prosecution, led by St. Louis County Prosecutor Bob McCulloch, presented the confession, witness testimony, and physical evidence. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, convicting Johnson on all counts. The judge sentenced him to death for the murder, calling it, perhaps the most heinous crime he'd ever seen, and added consecutive life sentences for the other charges. Johnny Johnson's 18 years on death row at Potosi Correctional Center in Mineral Point, Missouri, were marked by isolation and the weight of his crime. Life on death row was stark, a small cell, minimal possessions, and hours of confinement each day. Johnson, diagnosed with schizophrenia, reportedly struggled with his mental health. His behavior was mixed, sometimes cooperative, other times withdrawn. He spent his days reading, writing, and occasionally interacting with his spiritual advisor, especially as his execution date neared. Johnson expressed remorse in a brief handwritten note before his death, "God bless, sorry to the people and family I hurt." Yet, his sincerity was debated. Former prosecutor McCulloch called his claims of delusion nonsense, while others, like Justice Sonia Sotomayor, argued his mental illness was severe enough to question his execution's legality. Johnson's lawyers fought tirelessly, filing appeals based on his schizophrenia and arguing he couldn't fully grasp the link between his crime and punishment. They pointed to his history of stopping medication, which made him feel like a zombie, and claimed command hallucinations drove his actions. Despite a temporary stay from a 3-judge panel in 2023, the 8th Circuit Court and Missouri Supreme Court rejected these appeals, citing insufficient evidence of insanity. Johnson made no dramatic outbursts or escape attempts, he remained a quiet figure, shadowed by his past. His interactions with guards were minimal, and no records show close ties with other inmates. On August 1, 2023, Johnny Johnson woke up in his cell at the Eastern Reception, Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Bonne Terre, Missouri, facing his final day. The morning was quiet, with Johnson spending time alone, likely reflecting on his 18 years on death row. He met with his spiritual advisor, a key figure in his last hours, offering comfort as the clock ticked down. No records mention other visitors, but Johnson's focus was on preparing for what lay ahead. For his last meal, he requested a bacon cheeseburger, curly fries, and a strawberry shake, a simple, comforting choice that stood in stark contrast to the weight of the day. As evening approached, he was moved to the execution chamber. Strapped to a gurney, with a sheet up to his neck, Johnson turned his head to listen to his spiritual advisor one last time before facing forward. Eyes closed. His final words, written in a brief handwritten note, were released by the Missouri Department of Corrections: "God bless. Sorry to the people and family I hurt." At 6 p.m., the lethal injection of pentobarbital began. Johnson remained still, showing no visible reaction. At 6:33 p.m., he was pronounced dead, marking Missouri's fourth execution of 2023 and the 16th in the U.S. that year. Casey Williamson's mother, Angie Weidman, and other family members witnessed the execution, sitting silently in the chamber, seeking closure for the loss of their 6-year-old girl. The room was heavy with the pain of Casey's memory and the finality of Johnson's punishment. What does justice mean when a life is taken to answer for another? How do you think society should balance punishment with compassion in cases like this? What do you think? Leave your comments below.